Okay, so here's the next example. 1 minus sine squared t over 1 plus cosine t equals cosine t. So let's start thinking about what's happening here. We got fractions, that could possibly mean a common denominator. We got a square, maybe we're going to use a Pythagorean identity. Okay, so my first step is always, let's combine these and get a common denominator of 1 plus cosine t. All right, so for here, I'm going to have to multiply by 1 plus cosine t. And nothing on the other side. All right, so the thing I did was I got a common denominator. Okay, next, let's see. Maybe something will stand out more to you if I reorder this. All right, so I'm just going to switch around this 1 and this cosine. And you'll see why I did it. I just reordered. All right, so here's why I think this is helpful. I saw a square in this problem. This tells me I'm probably going to be able to use sine squared t plus cosine squared t equals 1. All right, I just had a sine squared t in here. So I could solve for sine squared t, but if I do that, I would have 1 minus cosine squared t, and I don't have a minus 1 in here. However, I do have a minus sign. So I'm going to subtract the sign from both sides. Well, what do you know? 1 minus sine squared t, that's exactly what we have right here. So I'm going to replace 1 minus sine squared t with cosine squared t. So this was a Pythagorean identity. All right, so let's not forget to always go back and look. What are we trying to get to? We're trying to get to cosine by itself. That means I need to be getting rid of this fraction. So how could I do that? How could I get rid of this 1 plus cosine t? Maybe it could cancel with something. All right, so notice I have a cosine t at the top and also a cosine squared t. So I'm going to factor out one of those. I'm going to factor out a cosine t. All right, so I'm just factoring. All right, so this is good. We see the same thing in the numerator as the denominator. Bam, we're just left with cosine of t equals cosine of t. That's exactly what we were looking for. All right, let's do the next one. All right, got cotangent of x over cosecant of x minus cosecant of x over cotangent of x equals negative sine x tangent x. Okay, all right, let's work on it. So working on the most difficult side, which is usually the left-hand side. All right, my first step is I see two fractions being subtracted. I want to get a common denominator. So I'm going to get a common denominator of cosecant x times cotangent x. All right, so in the numerator up here, I'm going to have to multiply this one by cotangent x. Minus, I'm going to have to multiply this one by cosecant x. Okay. All right, so first step, common denominator. Okay, all right, so let's see. I got cotangent times itself, cosecant times itself. That sounds like I need to use squares, which can be helpful because maybe we can use a Pythagorean identity. All right, so this would be cotangent squared x minus cosecant squared x. All right, I just made squares. All right, so hopefully I can use a Pythagorean identity. Which one? So on a test, they won't be given to you, so you'll have to remember them, right? So I always start with sine and cosine, so maybe sine squared x plus cosine squared x equals 1. I want to get cotangent and cosecant. What do I need to be dividing by to do that? Sine. So I'm going to divide by sine squared x everywhere. Alright, so that gives me 1. That gives me cotangent squared. That gives me cosecant squared. Whoops. Alright, well, what do we do with it? Which one do we replace? Alright, well, let's look at the problem. We got cotangent squared minus cosecant squared. Well, I do have an expression for cosecant squared right here, so maybe I'll just replace this with this one. Let's try that and see if that works. Minus Alright, and so this was a Pythagorean identity that I used here. Alright, let's go ahead and distribute that negative because I imagine that could help us out. Oh, sorry, this is a plus. 1 plus cotangent squared. So distributing that negative will be very helpful. Alright, so I just distributed in this step. And what do I notice? Cotangent squared x minus cotangent squared x, that's 0. So we're just left with negative 1 on the top. So I just combine like terms. So what do you think? Do you think you could handle the next step? Do you see where we're going here? We're trying to get negative sine x, tangent x. Right now we have negative 1 over cosecant x, cotangent x. Maybe we can break this fraction up. Oops, I always forget my c. Cosecant x 1 over cotangent x and now, what is 1 over cosecant x? Well, that's just sine x. What is 1 over cotangent x? That is just tangent x. Alright, so we just used reciprocal and quotient identities. All right, what do you guys think about this section so far? All right, let's do the last little bit.